In May 2023, many people gathered to see the coronation of King Charles III of England. And on the invitations that were sent to these guests, who were illustrated by a man called Andrew Jamieson, was an intricate design of all things that were seen as typically British and celebrating British culture. And this is a direct quote from the palace themselves about the invitation. They said, "The motif of the Green Man, an ancient figure from British folklore, symbolic of spring and rebirth to celebrate the new reign. Shown crowned in natural foliage, the form of the Green Man is made up of leaves of oak, ivy and hawthorn and the emblematic flowers of the United Kingdom." So this is really interesting because even the royal family are claiming the Green Man as a British thing. And if you ask most people, they'll probably think of English folklore and mythology, and they will often think of the modern pagan movement as well, which has kind of co-opted the Green Man. I myself, I've always been really drawn to the figure of the Green Man. I've got a Green Man just out of shot up here. I've got one over there. I've got like necklaces with the Green Man on. I've always been really drawn to this figure. So I was interested in, as usual, unpicking everything, going back to the roots and trying to figure out just who the Green Man is, where did he come from, and how did he get the meaning that he has today. So let's just start with the basics. What is the Green Man? What am I referring to when I talk about the Green Man? And I'll get into interpretations, folklore and that sort of thing a little bit later on in the video. But just firstly, what's the Green Man? Simply put, it is a decorative motif, a foliate head, a figure of a man surrounded by leaves and foliage. Sometimes it will be disgorging, so coming out of his mouth. Sometimes it will just be surrounding him, and sometimes it will be coming out of every orifice. And this is a decorative motif that is found all over the world in many different places all through history. So we're going to go and have a look and see if we can find a Green Man or Green Men in a real world location. And then we'll have a look into where did he come from and how did he come to have the meaning that he has today. If you're in the UK, it doesn't take long at all to find some kind of Green Man somewhere. So I've actually come into Durham today and we're going to go to Durham Cathedral and have a look and see if we can find some Green Men. The Green Man is a really common decorative motif in churches and cathedrals and that kind of thing. So I'm very surprised if we can't find one in there, but I thought it would be nice to show you one in the wild, as it were. So let's go and have a look and see what we can find. I've been searching all over the doors and just walking around for ages, and look where I just found them. So there are many figures like the Green Men that are in Durham Cathedral. all over the place, from churchyards to historic monuments, old ancient artifacts, artwork, and even music festivals named after the Green Man now. So it might be surprising to know, or might not be surprising given the reputation, I guess, the legacy of the British Isles to steal from other cultures, but the Green Man may not actually be British at all. In fact, he's probably not at all. The earliest examples that we can find of the Green Man are not British. He appears on 2nd century Roman temples in Turkey, in Jain temples, and then also there's a man called Mike Harding who was actually a folk musician, but he kind of got enamored with this idea of the Green Man and went around trying to find the Green Man and trace him down. And he recorded quite a few instances of the Green Man as well. He wrote a book called A Little Book of the Green Man, and in there he has examples as well from the 2nd century in Iraq and Lebanon. There's also a Byzantine mosaic from the 6th century which appears to have a Green Man foliate head on it. India and Malaysia seem to have their version of the Green Man. Interestingly, as an aside, Native American culture doesn't seem to have something as clearly foliate head Green Man as these other places. He's also all across Europe. There's a 4th century example of a disgorging Green Man where it's coming out of his mouth that is found in France, and everywhere from Germany, Italy, Poland, Hungary, and then of course also Britain, Scotland, and then a couple of rare occurrences in Ireland as well. So could this just be a nice decorative motif that people saw and kind of brought over from their travels and just got a bit of inspiration from? Historian and Professor Ronald Hutton, who is kind of world-leading expert in all things pagan, seems to think so, and this is a direct quote from him which I'll read out. He traces the Green Man to India, stating, "The medieval foliate heads were studied by Kathleen Basford in 1978 and Mercia McDermott in 2003. They were revealed to have been a motif originally developed in India, which travelled through the medieval Arab Empire to Christian Europe. There it became a decoration for monks' manuscripts, from which it spread to churches." So there you have it. We could just leave it there, end the video, and just say, yeah, that's what it is. It's a decorative motif that has come from elsewhere in the world, inspired people, and then they just started using it as well as art styles and things like that tend to spread. But I want to just pull at this thread a little bit and come to understand why the Green Man is synonymous with British folklore and storytelling and myth and that sort of thing now. Why is it not just like, yeah, that's a bit of decor that was taken from other cultures and it kind of spread all around the world, and leave it at that? And what might be surprising is that pretty much the reason that we know of the Green Man as a figure is because of the writings of one woman. So in the 1930s, Lady Raglin was really interested in the Green Man and was researching these foliate heads, I should say, because they didn't have a name at that point, these foliate head motifs that pop up all over the world, all through history. And she wrote an article in the journal Folklore where she was kind of talking about this thing, and she for the very first time put a name to this anonymous entity, and she referred to him as the Green Man. So essentially from this single publication which talked about the Green Man and then sort of linked in the idea of rebirth, new life, a kind of forest nature spirit, that idea just sort of spread. And you can see how recent it was. It was in the 1930s, so this was the first time we had a name for the Green Man, and yeah, it obviously spread really quickly, and now that's what we know of. If you say the Green Man to anyone, they have an image in their head instantly. So it's quite fascinating that it pretty much just came from that one journal article. So I'm interested in understanding why people latched onto this, why it became such a big thing, and why it's now synonymous with paganism and, you know, the old gods and these kind of things. Professor Carolyn Larington, who has written this book, The Land of the Green Man, which is a very good book, I recommend it. This is what she had to say about it. She said, "As a vegetation god, he has been shown not to exist. He was rather invented in 1939 for a world which was beginning to need him, a world in which people were gradually realising how industrialisation was stealthily degrading our planet. He came to represent all that the modern world undervalues, excludes or lacks. He doesn't appear in stories except those invented for him by modern writers, Larington explains, but his appearance as a hybrid of man and plant insists that humans are inextricably part of that natural world which we in the West are so keen to subjugate. So my inclination is to agree with this interpretation and agree with Ronald Hutton as well. Just because something changes meaning over time doesn't mean that the meaning is necessarily wrong. So what could have just started as a decorative motif, there's no reason why that couldn't have developed and morphed and gave meaning to people in a way that they really needed. I think there's something to be said for assigning life and meaning to something, and if that many people think something and, you know, give it that power, then it's kind of true in a way. That's not to say we should all just believe random stuff that is not accurate, but if so many people over hundreds of years really identify with this idea of the green man and they find a real source of strength and I guess inspiration and power from him, then I think that's valid as well. So I think that it's very interesting what she's saying, and I would agree with it. The Green Man is now just synonymous with British folklore and myth. He is the wild man, the jolly green man, the symbol of growth, virility and new life. And it's really easy to see how a simple decorative motif could blend in so well with British folklore. There are so many figures I think complement or mirror him really well, and I'm just going to go through some of those. These are just kind of my interpretations, but yeah, hopefully you find them interesting. It really seems like there is a need in storytelling, folklore, British culture I guess, to devise this figure of masculinity. We talk a lot about the mother goddess, especially maybe in modern paganism and that sort of thing. So I think it's interesting that we've created this sort of masculine nature god, I guess. It's a figure who is playful and mischievous, but also strong and virile, a wild man of the woods who represents kind of what we fear but also secretly desire. And the first obvious figure that comes to mind for me is Robin Hood. And Robin Hood is a man who lives deep in the green wood with his merry men, and he's kind of cast away from the expectations of society. They've kind of made their own society and their own rules. They steal from the rich and give to the poor and live in this kind of community. Artwork with Robin Hood is often depicted wearing all green and just being with the forest. It's almost like part of the trees himself. And Robin Hood is well, he deserves his own video, but he is just such an enduring figure in British folklore, and it's something that occurred to me when thinking of the Green Man and how it could get blended into the culture. I definitely thought of Robin Hood. We also have figures like John Barleycorn, which is an old Scottish song, and there is a poem in the Bannatyne manuscript from 1568, but it's thought that it's a lot older because that was actually a collection based on older poetry and song. And John Barleycorn is this kind of masculine figure of the harvest and the crop of the barley being harvested every autumn. So it all keeps coming back to this idea of like abundance in life and energy. There's also the more modern idea of the holly and the oak king. And this concept, which is a modern pagan concept, is the idea of the Oak King and the Holly King battling it out to change over the seasons. So when the dark nights start to come in, the Oak and the Holly King will battle, and the Oak King will win and take the crown, and then winter will unfold on the land. And this keeps going on in this never-ending cycle. So it really represents the balance of life and nature itself, and how things just keep going on in this constant cycle, and also the role of the masculine in that as well. To me, I also associate the idea of the green man with the horned god, and there are many different kind of manifestations of the horned god in different cultures. So sometimes he's known as Herne the Hunter from English folklore, mentioned by Shakespeare, of Pan, the Greek god of the wild, the shepherd and flock, or Cernunnos, however you want to say it, the Celtic god with not a lot of 100% confirmed history, but kind of evidence, I guess, relating him to animals, fertility, strength, endurance and that kind of thing. I can't help but think of the Gundestrup cauldron, which is a cauldron that was found in a peat bog in Denmark, and it's thought to date from 200 BC to 300 AD. It has a really clear depiction of a horned masculine figure who is sitting in this cross-legged pose with animals all around him. It's kind of gives off shamanic undertones. He's sat in this position, maybe some kind of like animal spirit guides and stuff. That's just me saying stuff, but that's what comes to my mind when I look at this figure. And I associate all of these horned gods with each other in this, again, going back to what Carolyn Larington said, this underlying desire to manifest a masculine deity, a masculine nature deity. It seems to come through for a lot of cultures and a lot of different times, and it seems like there's really a desire for that in humanity, and I think that kind of manifests through these different masculine horned gods of the wild as well. There's also the idea of the wild man, the Wodewoes, who appears in art and literature in medieval Europe. But there's even early references to a kind of a wild man, I guess, in the Bible, as King Nebuchadnezzar II is cast out by God to live like a beast. He's cast out from society. And this idea of this wild beast man living in the woods comes up quite a lot as well. After the Norman conquest in England, there were groups of wild men living out in the forests as social outcasts. An example is Edric the Wild, and there were various groups of people that just lived outside in tents and in the forest and things. In Arthurian myth, the Wodewoes comes in as well, in Gawain and the Green Knight, and Geoffrey of Monmouth describes how Merlin retreats into the woods and becomes a man of the woods, hidden, discovered by none, forgetful of himself, lurking like a wild thing. There are so many stories about the wild man, a lot of them really negative as well. It was something that people really feared. It was seen as just really going against social norms and quite scary for a lot of people. And when I think of the Green Man, I always think of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens and The Ghost of Christmas Past. I don't know if this is just because of the various manifestations of him in films and things as well, but I always see him and the Green Man as sort of similar. He's often depicted as this typical sort of green man figure, so surrounded by the harvest, vegetation, plants representing the wealth of the land, health, again, strength, virility. He's surrounded by all of this life and lushness and goodness. That's just a random one that always comes to my mind. And then another one from literature is Tom Bombadil from The Lord of the Rings, and if you've read them then you'll know this. Unfortunately he didn't make it into the film and we'll never get over it, but Tom Bombadil is like this kind of green wild man of the woods to me. He is a kind of quintessential man of the forest, whimsical, witty. He lives in nature and stays out of the affairs of men, and he's often depicted in this sort of like green man kind of style as well. So that's a bit of a summary of where the Green Man came from, some ideas on how he came to be, and then a bit of just my opinions and my interpretations and things as well. To me, all of these figures kind of represent the same thing, and I think it's very interesting. They kind of speak to humanity's desire to to find or tap into this wild, untamed masculine that can just be at one with nature, that can cast off the shackles of society and expectations and just kind of run shrieking into the woods, grow out his hair and his beard, and just really be at one with animals and the forest. The Green Man, to me, balances out the mother goddess. He is the horned god of the woods. He's strong, virile, full of mischief sometimes. He is this symbol that humanity keeps clinging to again and again after thousands of years, and is this really a symbol of the endurance of nature, the cycle of death and rebirth, and the idea that there is still hope of a person, a man, who can live at one with nature and tap into his untamed wild side. And I think that's kind of why the Green Man has prevailed so much and gone through all of these different adaptations. He's morphed with different cultures and storytelling and found his way into all of these little tales and characters, and I think it's fascinating, and I myself am always drawn to the Green Man, so I understand. But that's kind of it. I feel like I could go into the various manifestations of the Green Man forever and ever, but those are some of the main ones that I wanted to talk about. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the Green Man, your ideas on his various manifestations, if you've had any experiences with the Green Man, or if there's any near you. And I'm interested in hearing from men as well on what you think about the idea of like the untamed masculine wild man, and how that feels to you, and why do you think that's important for men and women, but what does it mean to you as a man? I'm interested in knowing, basically. So I'm going to leave that there. Hopefully you found it interesting, and I have written a Substack blog post as well, which is totally free, and I find it a bit easier to write and type things out. It's a little bit more articulate, let's say. So you can go and read that if you prefer to read stuff in that format as well. All the other usual links are down there, and I really hope to see you in the next video. Thanks.